So here's a quick introductory clip for those who are complete beginners on the Irish diatonic accordion C-sharp D system. Let's assume you want to play Irish music, Irish traditional music, on the diatonic accordion, and you've opted for the C-sharp D system. Of course, there are several other systems that are equally valid and better in some people's opinion, but this is not the place to discuss those. We could spend a long time discussing the merits of various systems, but I'm teaching the C-sharp D system, so let's assume you have a C-sharp D accordion, and much of what I say will apply to other systems anyway. So an introduction to the diatonic accordion, or two-row button accordion, as the Irish will probably call it. We have two melody rows here on the right-hand side. On my system here we have a row in D and a row in C-sharp. What this means is that each of these rows will produce the notes of a complete diatonic scale, which is akin to saying a major scale. So let's just imagine for a minute that we had a different system of accordion. This was a row in C. That means that the buttons on this row will produce all and only the white keys on a piano. Donc, that means a scale of C major. I have actually, this is in D, so these buttons will produce D major, like this. And this will produce C sharp major. Now, we don't often play tunes in C sharp major in Irish traditional music, so this gives you a clue that what this row is chiefly intended for is to provide all the missing notes. All the notes in the chromatic scale, all the black and white notes of the piano that we don't have on this row, we'll find them all on this row with a couple of bonuses as well. Now, the rest of the accordion, you have the bellows here, which of course provide air to the reeds. You have an air button here, which is very important in traditional diatonic accordion playing, especially in Irish music on this system of box. And you use the air button, among other things, to allow you to open or close the bellows without sounding any notes, because otherwise it's not a good idea to try and open the bellows without sounding a note. There's a bit of leak here, so this actually allows you to do it, but it's not very good for the instrument to do that, to force air through the reeds without the keys being open. On this model of accordion, Hona, a very popular accordion, the air button is operated by pulling down with the thumb. Lots of other models have a little triangular lever here which you press in with the thumb, and some models also have a round button here which you press in with the side of the thumb. But they all work in the same way. They open a valve which allows you to open the bellows. On this side of the accordion we have the bass side, it's called. We have bass notes and chords. Now, most two-row accordions will have only 8 buttons here. This one's a bit special, but the principle is the same, and anyway we'll not spend much time on the basses in the early stages of our learning. On the right-hand side we have 21 or 23, usually, treble buttons. This accordion again is a bit unusual, it has 22, it's been specially souped up for me. Let's look at what these buttons do. Now, as you know, the diatonic accordion is organized on the same principle as a harmonica, so we produce different notes when we are pressing the same button and either pressing or pushing or closing the bellows and drawing or pulling or opening the bellows. In fact, every button produces 2 notes depending on the bellows direction. This is what we might call bisonoric. Diatonic, by the way, does not mean producing 2 notes on one button. Diatonic refers to the notes in the scale, and there are plenty of diatonic instruments that have nothing to do with, don't have bellows, nothing to do with an accordion. So the push-pull action, or bisonoric action if you like, is what we're talking about, but diatonic means the notes in the scale. So when we're pushing our bellows on this row of D, we have three notes: D, F sharp, A, and this is repeated: D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, A. So there are no notes available to us when we're pressing on that row other than D, F sharp, and A, and these make up actually a D major chord. So that is the accordion. It's a chordal instrument. So everything we press will be part of a D chord. There's only three notes there, and they're repeated. Now we have on the pull direction we have to squeeze in four notes because yes, there are 7 tones in a diatonic scale. Not 8, but 7. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. That makes 7. Now, 7 is unfortunately not divisible by 2, so that gave a little bit of a design problem to the people who started making these instruments way back in the 19th century. And how did they fix it? They fixed it like this. On our first octave, our first full octave of the starting on our 3rd or 4th button, depending on your instrument, we get notes paired like this: D, E, F sharp, G. So it's push, pull, A push, B pull. Instead of pushing here, we pull again: C sharp, D, and that brings us back to our D in the right direction. Now, the fact that 7 doesn't divide into 2 means then that there's a shift between each octave. So whereas in this first octave, our first button contains D and E, when we get up here, our D is no longer paired with an E, but it's paired with a C sharp, and E is on the next button, where it's paired with an F sharp. So the note pairings are different between these 2 octaves. And this is really why it's only practicable to have 2 full octaves on a diatonic accordion because of this shift. If we added more octaves, the shift would get gradually more severe, and we'd find that our adjacent notes would not be on adjacent buttons, and indeed they get out of sync even down here. So that's why a diatonic accordion will always remain a folk instrument, and unless it's it's always going to have 2 octaves and a few notes below and a few notes above. So there we are. There's our scale. And what else do we need to know about the instrument before we start playing? Yes, how are you going to hold it? Most Irish accordion players play seated, and I adopt the same policy. Put the right hand cabinet or the melody cabinet, place it on your left thigh. Make sure you have a shoulder strap that is long enough to allow you to do that comfortably without hunching or cramping your shoulder, so that you can sit in a comfortable position, and then that leaves your left hand free to activate the bellows like this, and the right hand cabinet stays where it is. There's just a bit of tension on the strap, and then the other counteracting force is provided by your right hand, usually right thumb resting on the edge of the keyboard like this. Some very good players play like this with the thumb tucked behind, and then they're pressing with the... But most people find that you get more mobility in the fingers by having the thumb here, rather than having the thumb behind. And there you go. Of course, when you buy a new accordion, it'll probably come with 2 rather short straps, which would allow you to hold the accordion against your chest. Well, that doesn't suit everybody's anatomy, and besides which, as we usually play seated, it's more comfortable to have the cabinet here. Some people do other things, like put the melody cabinet outside the left thigh like that, so they get a good bracing stability, or even inside the right thigh. But you can experiment with all those possibilities. It all seems difficult at first, and difficult to stop the instrument from waggling about, but very soon you'll find things will settle down and you're playing quite comfortably. You might start off with a very sore thumb at first, but after a few weeks it'll all go away and you'll find yourself using the accordion naturally, ergonomically. The other important thing about ergonomics is how are you going to operate the bellows. Bellows. There are various different strategies for using the bellows. Here's the one that I used. It was taught to me by a very good player when I was taking my first baby steps on the diatonic accordion. And it is as follows. You want to use the bellows efficiently, and you want at all costs to avoid this kind of desperate in and out waggling of the bellows that you will sometimes see in less skillful players. And also especially on an old instrument like this with a very supple bellows, you can end up with this very annoying slap where the metal corners clash into each other. We don't want that. So this is the way that I was taught by a great player, one-row player from these parts, Sabin Jacques. He recommends keeping one edge of the bellows closed all the time and using it as a kind of a hinge, like this. So this part here stays closed and we open in a fan shape like this. This gives you a lot of control and stability. And also, as well as opening it in that fan shape, we curve our left hand forward so that we're in a sort of semicircle, concave shape here, and the bellows are more open at the back than they are at the front. Sometimes it gives you the illusion that a good Irish player is not using the bellows at all, but there's a bit more going on behind the scenes, as it were. Now, doing that, you can get very good stability because there's the kind of a pressure that's going across the accordion like that from the left hand to the right thumb, keeping everything nice, rock solid and stable. And you're being very efficient, and that'll help you to play fast and accurately. So that's how we use the bellows. I don't know if I covered the point about the thumb. I think I did. Anyway, the right thumb here for most of us, as opposed to behind the keyboard for some very good players. There's some very good players. Marcin O'Connor, and David Munnelly are two examples of people who play with their thumb behind the keyboard, and they're absolute wizards and speed merchants. But most of the rest of us, mere mortals, find it a lot easier to rest our right thumb on the keyboard edge. So there we are, initiation to the Irish two-row button accordion. Now comes the question of what tunes are you going to learn to play? You're very anxious to learn to play tunes. I would suggest, unless you're already an experienced Irish musician on other instruments, that instead of taking that reel or jig that you're desperate to be able to play on the accordion, in fact you start off by familiarizing yourself with the instrument using very simple tunes, tunes that you know by heart, tunes that you've known since you were a small child, Christmas carols or nursery rhymes, things like that. That means you'll just be finding out how to play those tunes on the instrument, and you won't be struggling with two things. You'll be struggling with one thing, the tune. You know the tune, so it's like where is it on the instrument. Whereas if you start learning, I don't know, Mayer Harrison's Fedora or something, you will be learning two things. You'll be trying to figure out the tune, memorize the tune, how does it go, and find it on the accordion at the same time. So you're making things doubly complicated for yourself. So I'm probably going to teach one of the simplest tunes I can imagine in the first lesson proper for beginners. I'm going to look at Frère Jacques, which we all know. It's a very simple tune, but its very simplicity allows us to appreciate one or two important technical points about using this instrument to best effect.